Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Two Bald Nerds. My name is Richard Chapman. I'm half of the Two Bald Nerds. The other half is Mike Meyers, and Mike is with me this morning. Say hi, Mike.
Hi, Mike. Sorry, it's so old.
I know, but I have to do it sometimes. Hey, May the 4th be with you, bro.
Yeah, it's May 4th. Look at us.
Star Wars Day, right?
Yeah, May the 4th be with you. There you go.
I think you got things a little confused there. Actually, I saw a friend of mine on LinkedIn. A friend of mine on LinkedIn posted a picture of the Next Generation crew with May the 4th be with you. I was like, that's funny. So
all good.
Anyways, we're going to talk about Active Directory today. We told everybody we would talk about it, kind of demystify Active Directory. I think a lot of people kind of know what Active Directory is to a certain degree, but it's like the big mystical thing in the sky. It just you ask it to do something and it does it, right? So
sure.
maybe we can demystify that for people. What do you think?
Sure. I always like it when people say, what is Active Directory? And they start with the definition like, well, it's a directory service. Okay, we know that. The whole idea of Active Directory came about by Microsoft in the early 90s, late 80s, depending on how you want to look at this, as a methodology for what we used to call back then single sign-on. Now single sign-on has a totally different meaning on the net. So this is one of the things when you're old, Richard, is that terms that you've known for a long time suddenly and arbitrarily get changed, and it's like, oh, so single sign-on no longer has anything to do with Active Directory. It's now has to do with signing on to different websites. Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so now it's called directory login, but I still use the term single sign-on, so bear with me. Look, no problem. The whole reason it exists is to get rid of a problem we had. So let me show you what the problem is first. And then we can look at it together. You ready? I have a little presentation for us.
Woohoo! Show and tell. I like it.
Yeah, assuming I can find it.
Hey, question for you. I've heard people say this, and I'm I obviously kind of have my own thought on this as well. But I've heard people say, well, Active Directory is just a database.
Well, it is a database, but let's understand why it exists first. Okay.
Okay. All
right. So what I got here is I've got 3 computers that are in a local area network. All right. So it could be like a dentist office or something like that. And we have different people who work at these different machines. And each one of these machines has its own little database of usernames and passwords. So if you take a look here, mainly the people who sign on to one particular machine will have their own usernames and passwords. All of these are made up, so don't try them anywhere, folks. You won't get too far. So what's the problem here, Richard? Just look at this. So, and by the way, if you have the latest version of Windows 11 or the latest version of Ubuntu Linux, it still works this way. So what's the problem with that, Richard?
I'm not sure I understand where you're going with that.
Okay, what's the weakness here? Let me give you an example. What if that middle computer had a database we all want to share? It's the customer list. Well,
gotcha. Only Jim, Jane, Bill, and Gabe can log into that machine.
Okay, but we could set it up in such a way so we could share that database folder so other people can log in. But the problem is they don't have accounts on that middle computer. So if you take a look on the far left, that Mike M, the only account he has is on that first computer. So what we've had to do, and you still have to do this if you don't use Active Directory, you end up making a Mike M account on all the computers that need to share stuff. Get the idea? And so from an administrative standpoint,
there's no permissions for that user on other machines. They only have access and permissions on that device.
Yeah, but in order to give them permissions, let's assume we're talking about Windows NTFS. In order to give them permission, we first must make an account, and then we can apply permissions to that account. So this has been an issue for computing for a long time. So what Windows invented a long time ago was the concept of, was the concept. So here's my 3 computers, but what I have now instead is this dedicated computer that's running a special operating system called Windows Server. And this machine is configured in such a way to be a domain controller. And when you have that, what happens is you no longer have your individual, what we call local accounts, everybody just has one database on the domain controller that they can log in. Okay. So this was the original Windows server that, came out in the early 90s. And it was a very, very popular thing for a long time. What they discovered is that if you're going to go ahead and store a database of usernames and passwords, why not stretch it out a little bit further? Why don't you make a list of all the computers so you can keep track of where they are? Or if you want to update all the Windows 10 systems in the engineering building by pressing a few buttons, you can do stuff like that. Or if you want to check the toner on the color laser printer on the 14th floor in sales, you can do that. So back in the early aughts, Microsoft took the idea of the domain controller and took it a whole other step higher. Instead of just managing usernames and passwords, it became a full-blown database. It's a database based on an old standard called X.509. And Microsoft even well, they didn't invent it, but they sure used it. They came up with a way to query this database called LDAP, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. And they even came up with their own authentication system called Kerberos. Yep. Yeah, other people invented Kerberos, but here's the challenge, Richard. Try to find Kerberos being used for anything other than Windows logins.
Right.
Good luck. I'm sure they're out there. I've never seen it. So the bottom line is Active Directory is a database. It is. But it's a database of your network. It's a database that defines what is your network and what's it all about. I mean, so first of all, in order to take advantage of a Active Directory, you have to have Windows Server. Now, there's some weird ways to get around it, but nobody does it. Okay. For example, you can use built into Linux is a tool called Samba, which Samba is a very good tool for logging into Windows networks. In my opinion, it's not that great of a tool to set up your own Active Directory. Okay. It can, but I don't like it. It's weird. So you first of all have to have a copy of Windows Server. All right. And that's not cheap. You pay about $100 for a copy of Windows Professional Workstation. Windows Server is actually done on what's known as client access licenses. Basically, it only allows so many people to log into the domain at a time. So that one Windows Server is going to cost you thousands of dollars. Then on top of that, it tends to be a more robust system. It tends to be sitting in a rack someplace. So we tend to use higher quality hardware because we don't want that system to go down, right?
Yeah, well, of course not.
People won't be able to log in.
Right.
And so that's where that all comes from. So hopefully that helps on that one aspect. Would you like to see?
Definitely.
Would you like to see an Active Directory?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Actually, so we were doing some investigations yesterday with some of our analysts going through the current cohort, and we were looking at failed logins. And of course, the data that we're receiving in our SIM tool is coming from the domain controller. So we're looking at those logs coming from the Windows system that's basically letting us know that they didn't log in successfully, seeing Windows event code 4625 for failed login, right? So
yeah, Windows Event Viewer is a very extensive and powerful tool. I would, if I had a choice between using Windows logging versus syslog, I'd use Windows any day of the week. I find it a lot easier to use. I know those are fighting words for a guy like you, but I just find the Windows logs easy. All right. Well, anyway, so let's take a quick look. Richard, this is a Windows Server machine that is configured as an Active Directory machine. Okay. So if you take a quick look at it, you see I'm using an unlicensed version here. That's okay. Microsoft likes it. So at first glance, it doesn't look very different from regular Windows, right?
Right.
But take a look. I mean, just the different commands and everything. It's a much more different animal than you might think. So anyway, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up one part of Active Directory called Active Directory Users and Computers. This is not all of the Active Directory, Richard. we're just opening one hatch so you can see users and computers that are associated with this particular domain.
Okay.
So if you take a look here, I've got, right now, there's only this one computer that's part of this domain because it's just a little test system I built up. But then we have all of our users. When you see two heads like that, those are groups. When you see individual users, that's an actual user right there. And I can do all kinds of stuff. I can make groups here. I can do all kinds of amazing things if I want to. But this is just one way to actually see a little bit of the Active Directory itself.
Okay.
So you got to be careful about a couple of things. Number one, in order to have Active Directory, you have to have a Windows server. Okay, so you install a Windows server, but then in order that you then have to go through a process which we used to call DC promo, domain controller promotion, and you would run this software on the Windows server in order to turn it into a domain controller. Now you might say to yourself, well, Mike, why would you have a Windows server that's not a domain controller? Well, because a lot of times you want one that's just a file server or something like that, okay? And so you tend to separate these jobs as much as you can, although other people are convinced it's how Microsoft wants to make more money. Like, for example, you can imagine if we lose our Active Directory, we'd be in a world of hurt, correct? So what Microsoft recommends you do is you install a secondary domain controller.
Right.
Yeah, you got to pay for it again, okay?
Yep.
But the idea is that one is a fall over to the other. And and I got to tell you, Active Directory is one of the easiest things to use I've ever seen in my life. Microsoft has had 20 years to tweak it, and it is the type of tool that you just don't need a ton of knowledge in order to make it work. It's surprisingly easy to set up. Now, there's a few things that, like, for example, if we go ahead and turn our Windows server into a domain controller, you have to, and this is how Microsoft says it, you have to make it a DNS server. It has to be a DNS server. You can't point it to another local DNS server. Every domain controller is a DNS server. So if you want to learn a lot about DNS,
good way to do it.
Yeah, get it, because it does a good job. And of course, DNS server is built into Windows Server, so that's nice. So that's the basics. Do you have any questions at this point?
Yeah, I do actually. So from somebody maybe studying for Security Plus, what do they need to know? Like, do they need to know how to run Active Directory, set it up, all that fun stuff? Or what's the extent of the knowledge that they need to have for Security Plus?
Well, make sure they know, like, for port numbers, make sure they know, LDAP 389. That would be one for sure. That might be more of a Network Plus question. Make sure you understand why it exists. Like, for example, I've seen server farms that are pure Linux, like every machine is Linux. However, they have one Windows server in there running as a domain controller, simply as a convenient way for people to be able to log in on any one particular system. And built into Linux is this tool called Samba, which makes it look like a Windows machine. So Linux machines can easily join a Active Directory domain. But it's that directory logon function is literally what keeps, I think, Microsoft in money these days. That and Office 365, but I don't want to get into a long sermon on that. So understanding the function of it, understanding the tools that go with it. Make sure you understand that Kerberos, however you want to pronounce it, is an authentication tool set. And especially on Network Plus and Security Plus, you have to have a fairly good understanding of Kerberos to be able to answer the questions. You also you want to understand even little basic things, like you can't just take a regular copy of Windows and make a Active Directory domain. You got to buy Windows Server, all right, and keeping that separate. So those would be the big things that I would say you need to know.
Okay, all right, cool. Well, we definitely see our domain controller in investigations when we're looking at login activity, security events that, generate offenses. So we do see, that as part of a normal security investigation. So it's good to kind of try to demystify that just a little bit. And also, again, those people that are studying and transitioning into cybersecurity, it's nice for them to have a little bit better understanding of what it is as well too. So
That's
awesome.
right. Yeah, the main thing about Active Directory is it gives us the opportunity for single sign-on. Oops, it's not called single sign-on anymore. It's called directory sign-on or whatever the heck it is. But without that, there have been attempts to make sign-on tools outside of Windows, and none of them have really taken off.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there like an alternative that is used regularly?
No, there is not. There are
Yeah.
alternatives. NFS network, forgetting there's a popular Linux tool that just never got any traction.
Yeah.
But
Gotcha.
probably the only thing that could be other than Active Directory would be Samba, which is basically a reverse engineer of Active Directory. So.
Well, I mean, sometimes if it works, why try to create something new other than just to, make money, right?
It's a powerful tool. It provides a single resource for all types of IT security issues that you don't have with Linux, or that you have to have set up specially with third-party tools. It's a little expensive, but it's a very, very powerful tool. And Windows Server comes with so much more than just Active Directory. So, I use Windows Server in my house, but for more other things. Like, for example, it has a built-in DHCP server, little things like that I like.
Just little things like that. Yeah.
I like control, really control.
Yeah, can imagine. Yeah, thank you so much for demystifying Active Directory for our viewers. As always, it's a pleasure. Have a great day, and we'll see you guys on the next video.
Bye, guys.
If you like Two Bold Nerds, check out our entire playlist right here. It's a lot of fun. We'll see you there.